Good morning. My name is Cherish Jones, and it's my privilege to serve as your worship associate today. We come together in community, encouraging each other on our own spiritual journeys, affirming the importance not only of tolerance, but of acceptance, compassion, and open-mindedness. Welcome to this good place, Tapestry, a Unitarian Universalist congregation. This week, we continue our July's theme of journey. The first thing I think of with journey is the popular quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson: "Life is a journey, not a destination." That is certainly true in so many regards to life, whether we actually set forth and plan the journey we are taking to soak up all that we can, or look back to a specific situation, see how it all unfolded, and realize the journey to get there, albeit unplanned, was what made the destination or goal that much more plentiful. This past week, my two kids, Ainsley and Dallas, my husband Brett and I took a road trip to San Francisco. I can certainly say that at about 6 hours up the 5 freeway in a minivan with a 5 and 7-year-old, it is only about getting to the destination. And coming home, when we finally got to LA and Ainsley frantically says, "I have to go to the bathroom," we of course swiftly take the next exit. Then too, all you care about is that destination, the potty. Well, let me tell you what that next exit was. It turned out to be Wilshire Boulevard in downtown LA at noon. Talk about a true test of patience for all 4 of us Joneses. Of course, I'm kidding. The whole purpose of our trip was the journey, exploring the amazing city of San Francisco, the beauty that surrounded it, the diversities within it, and the many, many laughs and discoveries we had along the way. For example, when Ainsley pipes up from the back seat, "What's procreation?" "It's painting a room." That's what I blurted out. I know, owl, we'll all go to owl someday. Today we have the privilege of welcoming Reverend Dr. Arvid Straube, a UU parish minister for 33 years, as our guest speaker in the pulpit. He has served congregations in Washington State, North Carolina, and most recently as the lead minister of the First UU Church of San Diego. He earned an MA from the University of Chicago Divinity School and a Doctor of Ministry at Meadville Lombard Theological School, where he now teaches. In 2013, Meadville granted him an honorary Doctor of Divinity degree. Dr. Straube has had a long life passion for helping individuals reach their best and deepest human potential. Since leaving parish ministry, he has devoted himself to a practice of spiritual coaching and spiritual direction. Many of his clients are Unitarian Universalist ministers. We have some exciting events coming up at Tapestry. You can find information about these and upcoming events in your order of service or on the website. You can also download the Tapestry app on your smartphone or tablet. It offers updated information, including events and worship services. We offer many groups and events that reflect our vision of being a transformational home for liberal spirituality and a dynamic leader in our greater community. One event I'd like to mention is that tonight from 7:30 to 9, there's going to be a Love Thy Neighbor candlelight vigil for the events of this past week. If you'd like more information on that, it's in Irvine, and there are some flyers in the back. And now Judy Tracy will light our flaming chalice, the central symbol of our Unitarian Universalist heritage. At times, our light goes out and it is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lit that flame within us. Please join me in saying our covenant, followed by our song of affirmation. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth and love, and to help one another.
Good morning. It's so good to be here. I was here once before as your pulpit guest, and as I said then, I'm quite impressed by the way this congregation has really embraced the call and the mission of your faith, your liberal spirituality here in this community. So when I picked the opening words today, of course, I didn't know what the events of the week would be, but they're still appropriate. And I want to tell you a little bit about the person who penned these words. His name is A. Powell Davies, who was the longtime minister in the 1940s and 50s of the All Souls Unitarian Church in Washington, D.C. And during his ministry there, he started all of the churches in the 2 rings of suburbs around Washington using a telephone line and a loudspeaker. And those churches are now some of our most vital churches. But he also sometimes had his sermons printed on the front page of the Washington Post because he spoke vigorously and from a biblical and from a Unitarian Universalist perspective against the McCarthy era. This reading is called Strange and Foolish Walls. The years of all of us are short, our lives precarious, our days and nights go hurrying on, and there's scarcely time to do what little that we might. And yet, we find time for bitterness, for petty treason and evasion. What can we do to stretch our hearts enough to lose our littleness? Well, here we are, all of us, all open, all upon this planet, bound together in a common destiny, living our lives between the briefness of the daylight and the dark, kindred in this, each lighted by the same precarious flickering flame of life. How does it happen that we are not kindred in all else? How strange and foolish are the walls of separation that divide us. Thus ends the reading.
Today's celebrations and concerns include one from Betsy Martin. Kay Martin's dear brother Jim passed away 3 days ago, and her dear sister Jane is in the hospital. Kay, Becky's sister-in-law, I'm sorry, this is from North Carolina. Yes, so please keep your thoughts and prayers in mind. Also, one other one for myself, there's a big fire in my hometown in Nederland, Colorado. It's called the Cold Springs Fire. And so I'd like to keep thoughts and prayers in mind for my friends, families, and all the firemen there. It's a town of about 1,000 people. There also have been some candles lit for those celebrations and concerns that are unspoken. We'll come up and read a story for the children.
Good morning. It's for everyone else, too. Yes.
I saw the back of it.
You saw the back of it. Have you read this book before? It's called Enemy Pie. There we go. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a treehouse in our backyard. Did I skip a page? No, okay. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, and I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been a perfect summer, but it wasn't. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood. Right next door to my best friend Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when he struck me out in a baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline, and I wasn't even invited. But my best friend Stanley was. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never even had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood. But as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it in my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. And you can see, enemy list, Jeremy Ross. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies, but he knew how to get rid of them. I asked him to tell me how. Tell you how? I'll show you how. He pulled a really old recipe book off the kitchen shelf. Inside, there was worn-out scrap of paper with faded writing. Dad held it up and squinted at it. "Enemy pie," he said, satisfied. You may be wondering what exactly is in enemy pie. I was wondering too, but Dad said the recipe was so secret he couldn't even tell me. I decided it must be magic. I begged him to tell me something, anything. "I will tell you this," he said. "Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies." Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how horrible it must smell, or worse yet, what it would look like. But when I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really, really good. And as far as I could tell, it was coming from the kitchen. I was a bit confused. I went in to ask Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. But Dad was smart. "If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never eat it," he said. I could tell he'd made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang and Dad put on the oven mitts and pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. I was catching on. But while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job. He talked quietly. "There is one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you need to spend a day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way that enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Of course I was. It sounded horrible. It was scary, but it was worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross, then he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. I rode my bike to his house and knocked on the door. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised. He stood on the other side of the screen door and looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I was nervous. "Can you play?" I asked. He looked confused. "I'll go ask my mom," he said. He came back with his shoes in his hand. His mom walked around the corner to say hello. "You boys stay out of trouble," she said, smiling. We rode bikes for a while and played on the trampoline. Then we made some water balloons and threw them at the neighborhood girls, but we missed. Jeremy's mom made us lunch, and after lunch we went over to my house. It was strange, but I was kind of having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice. But of course I couldn't tell Dad that, since he had worked so hard to make enemy pie. Jeremy Ross liked my basketball hoop. He said he wished he had a basketball hoop, but they didn't have room for one. I let him win a game, just to be nice. Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. He threw it and it came right back to him. I threw it and it went over my house and into the backyard. When we climbed over the fence to find it, the first thing Jeremy noticed was my treehouse. My treehouse was my treehouse. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't have to let her. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him. And if Jeremy Ross wanted in, "Can we go in it?" he asked. I knew he was going to ask me that, but he was the top person, the only person on my enemy list, and enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. But he did teach me to throw a boomerang, and he did have me over for lunch, and he did let me play on his trampoline. He wasn't being a very good enemy. "Okay," I said, "but hold on." I climbed up ahead of him and tore the enemy list off the wall. I had a checkerboard and some cards in the treehouse, and we played games until my dad called us for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him, and when he came out to get us, we tried to hide from him, but somehow he found us. Dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner. It was Jeremy's favorite and mine too. Maybe Jeremy Ross wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think that maybe we should just forget about enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out the pie. I watched as he cut the pie into 8 thick slices. "Dad," I said, "it sure is nice having a new friend in the neighborhood." I was trying to get his attention and trying to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy. But Dad only smiled and nodded. I think he thought I was just pretending. Dad dished up 3 plates side by side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. He passed one to me and one to Jeremy. "Wow," Jeremy said, looking at the pie. "My dad never makes pies like this." It was at this point that I panicked. I didn't want Jeremy to eat enemy pie. He was my friend. I couldn't let him eat it. "Jeremy, don't eat it. It's bad pie. I think it's poisonous or something." Jeremy's fork stopped before reaching his mouth. He crumpled his eyebrows and looked at me funny. I felt relieved. I saved his life. I was a hero. If it's so bad, Jeremy asked, then why has your dad already eaten half of it? I turned to look at my dad. Sure enough, he was eating enemy pie. Good stuff, he mumbled through a mouthful. And that was all he said. I sat there watching them eat enemy pie for a few seconds. Dad was laughing, Jeremy was happily eating, and neither of them was losing any hair. It seemed safe enough, so I took a tiny piece. Enemy pie was delicious. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me over to play on his trampoline in the morning. He said he'd teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how to make it. I still wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out or their breath turns bad. But I don't know if I'll ever get an answer, because I just lost my best enemy. And that is our story. Our class, we are all together, and it is for all ages. And we are in classroom 1.
It's really good to be together after such a horrific week. And this time of meditation and prayer in Unitarian Universalist congregations is a really precious time. We're together, but we're also by ourselves. We now have a little moment to reflect, to have our souls catch up with us. So there will be, after these spoken words, a moment of silence that you can use to nurture your deep self by prayer, meditation, or reflection. If you wish, you can silently follow along as I pray these words. Spirit of life, come to us to break down barriers, to widen horizons, to make us less judgmental. Help us to see the longer picture and the kinder conclusion, to love and let live, to embrace and forgive, to sustain and care. Help us to reach out to our better selves, that we may love more and hate less, care more and reject less, that bound together by understanding, we may sustain each other through trial and tribulation, through joy and happiness, through sickness and health. We seek a common and holy ground for one and all. Amen and blessed be. I hadn't originally planned to have a reading today, but these events of the past week have left me angry and confused and afraid. And so I found a reading that I've often turned to in times like these, and I thought I'd share it with you today. It's called What Team Are You On? And it's by the social activist Sonia Tinsley. Every day presents infinite reasons to believe that change can happen, infinite reasons to give up. But I always tell myself, Sonia, you have to pick your team. It seems to me that there are two teams in this world, and you can find evidence to support the arguments of both. The trademark of one team is cynicism. They'll tell you why what you're doing doesn't matter, why nothing is going to change, why no matter how hard you work, you're going to fail. They seem to get satisfaction out of explaining how we'll always have injustice. You can't change human nature, they say. It's foolish to try. From their experience, they might be right. Then there's another group of people who admit that they don't know how things will turn out, but have decided to work for change. I see Martin Luther King on that team, Alice Walker, Howard Zinn. I see my chaplain from college and my activist friends. They're always telling stories of faith being rewarded, of ways things could be different, of how their own lives have changed. They'll give you reasons why you shouldn't give up, testimonials why we've yet to see our full potential as a species. They believe we're partners in God's creation and that change is really possible. There are times when both teams seem right. Both have evidence. We'll never know who's really going to prevail. So I just have to decide which team seems happier, which side I'd rather be on. And for me, that means choosing on the side of faith. Because on the side of cynicism, even if they're right, who wants to win that argument anyway? If I'm going to stick with somebody, I'd rather stick with people who have a sense of possibility and hope. I just know that's the side I want to be on. Just in case that sermon title and description has confused anybody, I want to make one thing clear. I despise Donald Trump. And, you know, this is not bragging. I mean, it's just true. I won't talk about policy proposals. I won't talk about the politics of this. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for or how you should feel about this. I will tell you this, that the wisdom traditions of the world, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, Confucianism, Islam, all the great religious traditions agree, essentially, on what it means to be a good person, and that means to have integrity. That means to be honest. And that means, above all, to be compassionate, to care about other people, to be able to take their point of view, to understand their suffering. Usually politicians aren't so good at one or more of those. I don't think Donald Trump is good at any of those. You know, Cecil Bach, who's a moral philosopher at Harvard, talks about the moral atmosphere. The moral atmosphere is, you know, how people are with integrity and kindness in the culture at large. And every time we do something unkind, or every time we lie or deceive or betray, we are contributing to moral pollution. Because we all share this moral atmosphere, just like we share the literal and physical atmosphere. And I'm afraid that we were choking for a long time in the moral atmosphere of our culture right now. And I think it's gotten worse. Meanness is downright pervasive in our culture. It's defended, it's everywhere. We think it's funny to be unkind to others in our media and in our entertainment. But I think Mr. Trump has made it legitimate. The Southern Poverty Law Center reported one teacher as saying, "We've seen Donald Trump behave like a 12-year-old, and now 12-year-olds are behaving like Donald Trump." The kids are saying to each other in the playground, "Well, when Donald Trump's president, then we're going to deport you, and I won't have to put up with you anymore." Or, "Why can't I say that? Donald Trump can say anything he wants." And the harm, I think, no matter what the results of the election is going to go on. And we're going to have to deal with the forces that have been unleashed in this political season for for a long time. And that's the end of the politics right now. This is really not a political sermon, it's a confessional sermon. The Renaissance preacher, John Donne, he's a poet too. You had to study him in school. But he was better known in his day as a preacher. And he said, I preach to myself and allow others to listen. And that's what I plan to do today. I need to hold myself to the standards I say I believe in, to what I say I've committed my life to. And if it's relevant to you, and I hope it is, please take that offer. I know that Donald Trump is my spiritual teacher because he makes me think about a question that the great Rabbi Hillel, who was a contemporary of Jesus, said. He said, when no one else is behaving as a human being, then you must behave as a human being. So this is a confusing, baffling, enraging, fearful time in our country's history. And so much is out of my control. But what is under my control is, how do I behave through this? How can I behave as a human being? How can I live what Rabbi Hillel told us to live, to behave as a human being? And Donald Trump is therefore my spiritual teacher because he pushes all the buttons that make me think about that question. Now, we can learn a lot about our spiritual condition by looking at our reactions to the people we despise. You know, this campaign has made it really hard for me. When I read the paper in the morning, I sometimes curse. I try not to. My wife doesn't like it. It ruins her breakfast. And I use words that, not kind, okay? And it isn't just about Donald Trump. But I know that that's a danger sign for my spiritual condition. I know that when I do that, it's a danger sign for my spiritual well-being. The great religious scholar Karen Armstrong has written a book called 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life. And she makes a very important point. I hope you remember this point. She says that every one of the great religions of the world has some version or other of the golden rule. And she said not only that, but she said that is the core of all of those religious traditions. That all of the world's religious traditions have at their core compassion. Now, and she goes quickly on to say that every one of those in their history has not lived up to that core value. Every one of those religions. They've fallen into dogmatism and even killed people in the name of their faith. But she makes a good argument for the golden rule being at the core of all of those traditions. As Jesus put it, do to others as you would have them do to you. Often in those other traditions, it is stated in a negative way, like Rabbi Hillel did, when a pagan came to him and said, look, I will convert to Judaism if you can say the essence of Judaism while standing on one foot. And Rabbi Hillel stood on one foot and he say, that which is hateful to you, do not do to others. The rest is commentary. So understanding that sometimes what we think is great is not so great for other people, many of these traditions say, we all know what we don't want others to do. We don't want others to hurt us physically. We don't want others to treat us with disrespect. We don't want others to treat us unkindly. We don't want others to steal from us. We don't want others to betray us. And Jesus was right too. We all want others to treat us with kindness and respect and to see the good in us. So The problem is that we human beings have really complicated brains. We have this reptilian brain, which we share with lizards and snakes and turtles, which is basically having to do with our survival instincts, and we needed that. Those instincts that come from this most primitive part of our brain, some of the scientists laughingly call the 4 Fs. It has to do with feeding, fleeing, fighting, and something to do with procreation. And we also have more complicated brains that have evolved since, including a brain that we only share with other humans. And that's the part of our brain that allows us to feel with others, that allows us to see the world from other people's points of view, that allows us to give unselfishly, or perhaps out of a greater sense of selfishness, by understanding how much we're all connected, and therefore we do need to treat others with kindness, compassion, and respect. That's part of our human heritage. That's part of who we can be. But the problem is, while those instincts from our primitive brain are automatic, we need to choose. We need to choose to act from the most human part of our brain. The Buddha taught that there are 3 poisons of the mind that create almost all human suffering, both individual and collective. The first of these poisons is hatred or aversion. The second is greed or grasping. And the third is delusion. Now think about the events of the past week. And don't you see those poisons at work all through the events that have been going on? So let's look at them. Aversion. We all want a better and more compassionate world. But as I look at myself, I'm afraid I'm going to be one of those bitter activists who only sees the negative, who gets discouraged and loses hope and despair, which I think is, frankly, a cop-out. A lot of our social justice efforts are tinged with fear and guilt and anger, not the best part of ourselves. They're not part of compassion and vision and hope. That's not what's put forward. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be angry about what's happened, about police brutality, about the pervasiveness of violence in our society as a whole, about the racism and the xenophobia. Yes, we should be angry. But that energy should lead us to try to solve the problem, and it should never lead us to hate. It should never lead us to hate. I don't care what your Facebook friends are saying. It should never lead us to hate, because hate is absolutely soul-destroying. And if you look at the great social justice movements of Gandhi, of King, of Cesar Chavez, of the response in East Germany to the communist oppression, they all started with a vision of hope and an appeal to faith and our common humanity. So that means that when I feel this hatred beginning, or even this aversion beginning, I need to look at that and look at the fear that's at the bottom of that anger, the fear about what might happen to our country. And the second of these poisons is greed. Now, we think about greed as wanting something material, but actually there's a lot more subtlety to that, the way the Buddha taught it. He taught that grasping after and clinging to opinions is also greed. Holding tight onto an opinion is greed, which leads to the third of the great poisons, which is delusion. Look, we live in a complex world that we can't control. And that is difficult to accept because that shows us just how vulnerable we really are, just how much we really depend on each other. And it's so much easier to pin the blame on a person or a group of people and say, they're responsible. If we can only get rid of those people, everything would be fine. And that is all sides of the political spectrum. 50% of Americans, according to one study, believe in some kind of conspiracy theory. But the thing is that simple solutions are always wrong. And believe me, I know about the paradox of that statement. Simple solutions are always wrong. And they're morally dangerous because almost all the evil in this world is committed by those who think they are completely right, and therefore they are justified to do violence and even kill people who disagree. My late colleague, Frank Forrester Church, talks about the need to understand that however passionately we might feel about an issue, we should kind of be in touch with the minority opinion, even in our own minds. And that sometimes we might need to act out of 51% conviction, but we have to act. And that things are always subject to change, and we can't grasp the whole thing. We should ask ourselves the question that the French philosopher told us to ask ourselves, Voltaire, is this true? How do I know? In a world where no one else is behaving like a human being, you must behave as a human being. So how am I to behave? What does our precious democracy require of us now? The Buddhist teacher Surya Das has written, Mahatma Gandhi said that mute prayer was his greatest weapon, and that we ourselves must be the change we wish to see in the world. To me, that means we work from the inside out to make a better world. We cannot love life and humanity and not each other, one by one. I am so tired. I'm so tired of finding enemies. I'm so tired of making enemies. I'm so tired of blame and hatred and disrespect in our political discourse from all sides. You know, mostly I've got liberal friends on Facebook, but I've got a few conservative friends too. And it's on all side of the spectrum. And I've been unfollowing people left and right if they have demonized or dehumanized opponents. And it doesn't matter if I agree with their positions or not. I'm tired of it. And I think sometimes I'm almost tempted to shut Facebook off until November 9th. Because you know, all these partisan positions, they seem to have not changed for decades. All these proposed solutions, they haven't gotten us anywhere. The truth is somewhere else. But we just keep yelling the same things at each other. It's nuts. So I've tried to quit listening to people who spew hate and demonization, and I've tried to quit cussing at the newspaper. No matter if I agree with a policy or not. And I try to listen to and understand people of goodwill who disagree with me, and yes, there are people of goodwill who disagree with me. One of my favorite conservative columnists, do you read conservative columnists if you're a liberal? Do you read liberal columnists if you're a conservative? Think about it. One of my favorite conservative columnists is Arthur C. Brooks of the New York Times. He wrote something that really grabbed me a couple months ago. He said, next time someone on your side insults people on the other side, think of someone on that side that you love and respect. You have just been insulted. Think about that. And what if you don't have anybody on the other side that you love and respect? I think there's moral danger there. I think there's moral danger there. Because in a world where no one else is behaving as a human being, you must behave as a human being. And you need to choose a team. May it be so. Blessed is the path on which you travel. Blessed is the body that carries you upon it. Blessed is your heart that has heard the call. Blessed is your mind that discerns the way. Blessed is the gift that you will receive by giving. Truly blessed is the gift that you will become on the journey. May you go forth in peace.